number one question I always love to ask folks on my as guests on my show here is, and again, especially in this show where how I've served, what brought you to the life of service that you've obviously led?
Well, considering that question before the interview began, I realize there's been different seasons in my life, as there are different seasons in all of our lives. So when you try to find an answer that's comprehensive for the question, what brought you to a life of service? There are different elements that occur to me that happened in different seasons. And I'd probably just kind of break it down to probably 2 or 3 elements real quickly. I'll hit them. Number one, what brought me to a life of service? As a kid, there were people in my life that were mentors, coaches, teachers who had a profound influence on my life. I'll give you an example. I was 17 years old. My father, my stepdad, committed suicide. In that time and space in my life, at 17, about to graduate high school, teachers and coaches rallied around me, lifted me up at a time when it was a difficult time for me, not sure what the future held. And I remember going to the funeral home with my football coach, J.D. Covington, who's now deceased. And, he went to the funeral home with me to be with me so I could view my dad's body, And he sat out in the truck and he waited. And when I got back out there to his truck, he was crying, and he asked me what if I wanted to talk about stuff. And I remember telling him that I wasn't sure, what I should do next. Like, should I take my college scholarship I got to go play football and leave home, or should I stay home and support my mom? I didn't know what to do. And he asked me, he said, well, have you prayed about it, And that hadn't really occurred to me at that moment because I was so distraught with what was going on. And I said, well, yeah, I remember before my dad died, like 3 or 4 months before my dad took his life, my dad did something I had never remembered him ever doing before. And that was, we stood in the kitchen together, and he asked me to pray with him about, whether or not I would be able to go to school there, Mm-hmm. And so at that moment, I remembered this prayer that I had with my dad, because it was the only time I'd ever remembered praying with my dad. So I could go deeper into the story, but just suffice it to say that's a good example of a moment where people went way out of their way to serve somebody else. That somebody else was me. And that made a deep impression on me, that they weren't just teachers and coaches. They were human beings, and they were there to serve others,